So the first thing we want to do is to stop the violence, stop the immediate gun violence. Then the medium term is to speak with the if you want to call the leaders of whatever gang, because I don't want to say gang, I'm not so sure, or whatever faction or who are warring, to bring them together to see that we can achieve peace. And then the long-term goal now is to empower everyone.
We cannot just say to ourselves, listen, this is police problem or this is the government problem and so on. The police and the government and so on, they cannot do it all by themselves. And it means that, all of the different sectors of society should see it fit to play whatever role they can play in their area or specialization and so on. The private sector, organizations, if you can employ some of the unemployed youth and so on, you do your part, whatever way you can and so on. The idea is that we need a national effort, a national drive, right, to quell as much as is possible this issue of gun violence and other violence and so on.
After the passing of Arthur Braveboy, and I extend condolences to his mother and family and friends, also to the family of Von Cyrus and Shane Brown, three young men, maybe late 20s, middle 30s, all in the prime of their life. Now, after the passing of Arthur Braveboy, Mr. Ruggles Ferguson contacted me in my capacity as president and said, look, the bar needs to take an initiative, because we don't want to have this spilling over to the citizenry, where you have folks being afraid to even come out of their houses, or fear of, you have drive-by, so you pass in and, you got shot or got injured by a stray bullet. So what he suggested is an initiative by the bar that he would have taken in 2006, whereby he brought the Ginger crew and the Bloods together to initiate we want to call it a peace treaty, so to speak, because you had these two gangs warring for quite a while, and he achieved immense success in doing so. So instead of inventing the wheel, he said, let's the bar run with an initiative. We would invite the other stakeholders, and let's see how we can get this gun violence to stop in the short term, and in the medium and long term, maybe to have as far as possible a great reduction in crime, or even zero crime. So we form a subcommittee of the bar, which comprises of 8 persons. We have 6 males and 2 females. As Mr. Gill indicated, we have a very small cadre of lawyers operating at the criminal bar. So we are very lucky to even have 2 females who appear before the criminal court, whether magistrate or high court. We started off by having a meeting last week, and we realized that it's an initiative, so the bar cannot do it by itself. So we invited other stakeholders. So we had a meeting with Dr. Niz Chaitan, who's a crime reduction specialist who have worked in North America, and as far as I'm aware, as recently in St. Kitts and St. Lucia, where he too has achieved quite some success in reducing crime, particularly in St. Kitts. We also invited Claude Douglas, who is a sociologist, to give us some insight. Now, what we want to do is to reach out now to other stakeholders, which include the Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Ferguson would have reached out to the chamber, reach out to President of the TUC, Andrew Lewis, and reach out to the churches. We identified at least 2 religious leaders that we think would be able to assist, because they would have done outreach like that in the past. Who am I missing? The Mediators Association, to have dialogue and try to get to the root of the problem. What is causing the conflict? What is causing, if you want to call it the gangs, I don't want to say gangs, but what is causing folks from the town of St. George and folks from the south of the island to be in dispute? Did I miss out anyone? I think that is it. So next week we intend to have a meeting with all these broader stakeholders. As I said, the bar is pushing the initiative, but we need, obviously, we cannot do it by ourselves. And we need folks who are the specialists who understand sociology, the demographics, the socioeconomic conditions, and Dr. Chaitan as a crime reduction specialist and all the other stakeholders. So the first thing we want to do is to stop the violence, stop the immediate gun violence. Then the medium term is to speak with the if you want to call the leaders of whatever gang, because I don't want to say gang. I'm not so sure, or whatever faction or who are warring, to bring them together to see that we can achieve peace. And then the long-term goal now is to empower everyone, so that when you're empowered and you armed with the tools to find a job, you educated, what you want to be is a productive member of society, and not to engage in any criminal activity. So that is the initiative the bar is putting forward. As I say, it's already off the foot, since we have already formed that committee and met with just a few of the stakeholders. So by next week, we should start putting things in place with the general stakeholders to lift off.
Mhm. And let me bring in Mr. Gill here to piggyback or add to what was said. I do see here that there's a wide cross section of concerned parties. What about youth? How would they be involved in that?
Well, all stakeholder organizations and interest groups. So that we will be meeting with the youths, and I'm not certain how active we have a national, how active the national youth organization is. But definitely we'll be reaching out to all of the stakeholders. And so, you see, Dr. Bob, what is extremely important, whether we have individuals, small groups of young men that band themselves together, sort of, and we refer to them as gangs or what have you. We would really want to put an end, if there is any, to a situation where there are reprisals of back and forth and revenge sort of thing going back and forth. Because you see, we do not have to look far to see what gun violence has done to other neighboring societies. Let's take Trinidad, for example, and so on. And one can recall and say, well, when this level of violence started in Trinidad, I lived in Trinidad for a while, so too Mr. Paul and so on, in the middle 90s or thereabouts. You walk Tunapuna, Curep Road, and so on, any hour, day or night, without much fear, basically. Of course, you always had incidences, but not as now. And persons say, well, it's bad boys are shooting one another, They soon they go kill out one another. Now, years later, the gun violence is very prevalent in Trinidad. So it seems as though there's is there a barrel full of bad folks that shoot each other and so on? I don't think so at all. So that what is needed is to see how we can de-escalate the tension between individuals and between groups of young men, de-escalate situation between different communities and so. That's extremely important because, and that is, let me just add, these are things that, as individual attorneys, we do informally at every turn. You speak to your clients, you try to encourage them to do the right thing and so on, stay away from the violence and so forth. So these are things that we do on a daily basis, as person that practice in the criminal bar. But here it is that the Bar Association is taking a more formal approach, where we are including other stakeholders with us to drive an initiative and to go within the communities, go into the societies, meet the individuals involved, meet families and so on that are affected. Because let's face it, you have persons who are charged, these persons and their families are going through a rough time. The deceased family, they too are suffering, so really and truly, you have two sets of people, families and communities hurting, basically. And it's a situation where we cannot just say to ourselves, listen, this is police problem or this is the government problem and so on. The police and the government and so on, they cannot do it all by themselves. And it means that, all of the different sectors of society should see it fit to play whatever role they can play in their area or specialization and so on. The private sector, organizations, if you can employ some of the unemployed youth and so on, you do your part, whatever way you can and so on. The idea is that we need a national effort, a national drive, right, to quell as much as is possible this issue of gun violence and other violence and so on. Of course, we do not manufacture these firearms. We do not make bullets in Grenada. So that where are the points of entry, seaport, airports, how are these weapons coming? How are they reaching our young people and so on? How are they getting access to these firearms? So that's an area of concern that the national security will have to deal with, as the customs, the immigration, the police force and so on. These are issues that they have to deal with. So we have to look at different aspects of it. We have to, and as much as is possible, tighten our borders and so on to ensure that, because from time to time you hear through the news and through the Bob report and so on, that you have persons who are non-nationals coming on the island because of our borders are porous. We have so many beaches and so on. We cannot have a Coast Guard unit stationed at every bay or every inlet on the island and so on. So that there is this concern of non-nationals coming on island and so on. What is it can we do to our maritime space to create more security? What are the investments that we need to make in the Coast Guard unit and so on to ensure that as much as is possible that we can reduce or limit persons who may very well want to embark on a criminal enterprise who lives outside of Grenada and so on. So there are a lot of national security issues and questions that need to be asked. I guess there are more questions than answers. But at the same time, the Bar Association, we are endeavoring to do what is it that we could to ensure that we can reach out to these young men and that we can see if we can influence positive change to really and truly stem the tide of that surge of gun violence in the country.
Now, you prefaced, Mr. Paul, this initiative by referencing the what occurred in the early 2000s when the Ginger crew and the Saffron crew. I remember those days, but some might say that the incentive structure to be engaged in any type of gun violence has changed, and now it's much more drug related, and now it's much more cross-border related. So that might be a challenge that you might confront. Is that something that you have given thought to? That the incentive structures are totally different than what obtained in the 90s. It's no longer sort of a cutlass beef, but as Mr. Gill said earlier, the character of these crimes have changed. We're talking about very brazen drive-by type activities. We're talking about targeted contract for hire killings. These types of things, you hear about what happens in neighboring Trinidad and Tobago. Kidnappings. I mean, these things we're not used to those things. So how do you really think about the incentive structure and just the changing nature of these types of criminal activities as part of your bid to bring peace?
Right. And that's why I said that it's an initiative that the bar is taking. We reaching out to stakeholders who have the expertise. And I make reference again to Dr. Neil Straighton, who is a crime reduction specialist. He would have gone into the bowels, as he said, of St. Lucia, into the ghettos, and also in St. Kitts, and bring parties together. No, we as lawyers, we can only do so much. And hence the reason why we ensure that we have other stakeholders. No, as Mr. Gill is alluding to, it has to be on a national level. And obviously, the government is doing its part by the amnesty. The police has to do its part as well. We can't take away from what the government and the police have to do. The police have their duties. The government has its duties, right? The Minister of National Security has his duties. We are just ensuring that we do what we can do. So we don't have the necessary tools. But by meeting with the various stakeholders, we intend to get the tools to combat the prevalence of these gun crimes. We are fully aware that it's not the cutlass wielding that we had in 2000, the early 2000s with the Ginger Crew and the Bloods and whoever. No, it's firearms, which is far more deadly.
Not only far more deadly, but much more sophisticated.
I agree, much more sophisticated. So I missed out two of the important stakeholders.
Yes.
The parliamentary reps for both the tongue of St. George and St. George's South, that's the Honorable Peter David and Andy Williams. Because we think that these parliamentary reps obviously have a lot of influence in the constituency, and they too are needed to bring parties together to ensure that we have some sort of peace, because we need that. Otherwise, the public would just be in fear. And we don't want the public to be in fear, as Mr. Gill indicated, what is now happening in Trinidad. You don't want to start off and say, oh, these are guys, getting rid of each other. And then you have this spillover now onto the innocent citizenry if you want to save that, right? And everybody now start to take notice. So we are taking note now. We know that we don't have the necessary tools, and here's the reason why we want to bring everyone on board and encouraging not only the stakeholders that I have just mentioned. Maybe as we meet with these other stakeholders, someone may point it and say, okay, you need to bring the business sector on board. Because the private business sector, we need to have them on board and say, okay, can you, as Mr. Gill said, can you provide employment for these youths? And in providing employment is empowerment. And you're taking them off the street. So it's less idle time, less time to get into what gun violence or any other crime. So I think that, yes, we don't have the tools, but we would get the necessary tools. I think that by taking this initiative, that we are poised to assist the nation in bringing about peace, immediate peace, and then to stop the gun violence and other violence in the nation. Because we want to have, as Mr. Gill said, we all live here. Whether lawyer, doctor, ordinary citizen, it doesn't matter who it is, we all live here, and we want to ensure that we can live in a peaceful society. Grenada is always relatively safe. It's only as recently as last year we stopped having all these gun violence. We want to go back to how we were before. Yes?
Absolutely. Anything you want to piggyback on there, Mr. Gill? And we'll get to some viewer comments.
No, I think the President said it well. None of us can claim that we have the answers or the solution, all of the answers and all of the solutions. But we believe that with a purposeful engagement of all the stakeholders, that we can resolve, if not all, but most of the issues. What we want to see in the short term is, one, if we can have, as I do not have the statistic as well, but if we can get some momentum with regards to the amnesty, increase the promotion, increase the awareness, and educate persons with regards to the benefits of utilizing this period of amnesty, where illegal firearms and ammunition can be brought into the police force. That's one. Secondly, we can de-escalate the tension between individuals, groups, communities, and so on. And as I indicated, as attorneys, we have certain perspectives. We may not have all of the relevant expertise, but to engage persons that to have the expertise and can point us in the right direction. And so get the mediators to facilitate the meetings between varying groups and so on, and put in different scenarios before them, providing them with alternative resolutions and so on. So I believe it's kind of, Dr. Bob, it's really a call to arms. It's a situation where we cannot just put our hands down on our side and leave it to the enforcement officers. It's all hands on deck basically, where persons in the communities, something and so on, you speak to people in the communities and so on, your neighbors and so, trying to encourage persons to desist from any sort of criminal enterprise, and to desist from violence.
Hi everyone, thanks for checking out the Bub Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.